Okay, great. This is something that a number of us actually were discussing last night, and some of us have been discussing throughout the day. So first of all, who's actually used LLVM's Fabricator before for code review? Okay, does anybody not know what Fabricator is? A few of you. Okay, so Fabricator is a code review tool that's somewhat similar to, well, basically a number of ex-Google people. So at Google, they have a code review tool called Gerrit. A number of ex-Google people went and worked at Facebook. They then made their own version of it, which is called Fabricator, and added on lots of bells and whistles. This got open sourced, and we kind of have Fabricator, which has quite a nice a slightly different workflow to GitHub, but it has a nice workflow for reviewing patches. And so if you haven't been involved with upstream LLVM development, the general approach is that you post patches, you put them on Fabricator for review, and then at least one or two other people will look at them, make comments, and they'll click accept if they think that it's worthwhile going in. So who has ever submitted a patch for LLVM? Okay. And who has submitted an LLVM patch and found it languishes for a long time with no reviewers? So at least once, right? And so, of course, this could be a very off-putting process of people who are contributing for the very first time, people who might have been using our LLVM internally at a company, or maybe in their research, or just the hobbyists who are trying to make a difference. And they may have put a lot of effort into trying to get their patches out there, but you might be kind of feel a little bit left out in the cold. So it's the contribution process, which is nicely documented. It's clear what you have to do, is that you write a patch, you submit it to Fabricator, you look in the code owner's file of LLVM and try and work out who the appropriate code owner is to mark them to review it, so at least there's one reviewer. Sometimes that's clear, sometimes it's not. If you already know people in the LLVM community, that's great because you already have some people and you can try and force them to do it, use your social capital. And otherwise, the recommendation is you look at Git blame, you try and find the last person who was unfortunate enough to touch the file, and then you try and make them go and look at your code. But there are obviously some potential problems with this. Code owners are often busy, so it can take a long time to get any response. Newcomers haven't yet gained the kind of review currency in the LLVM community, where once you're somewhat established, then other people know who you are. They know it's worth reading your code. They know that if it's a bit of you scratch my back, you scratch yours, a bit like the peer review system in academia, where there's an understanding that everybody reviews everyone else's stuff. But if you're new to the community, that won't have happened to you before, so people won't know who you are. They won't know to get in there. And of course, if you put onto all this effort, then finding that no one's actually been able to go through and look at your code yet can be quite off-putting. And of course, if people look at your code and they say something, they respond, but actually it's not appropriate for upstreaming LLVM at this time, or point out things, well, that can be disappointing as well. But actually, I think most of the time, people would feel much happier to know that someone's actually taken the time to look at their contribution. So I think it's worth looking at what some other very successful projects do to try and deal with this problem. So Rust is another programming language that targets LLVM. They have their own kind of weekly development newsletter, and every week they list the number of new contributors. So this is people who have submitted something and had a patch merged, which always seems impressively large to me, even if they're all trivial patches. It's not quite as easy to get the same thing for LLVM because of the way that we sometimes lose commit authorship metadata, but I'm almost certain that the list wouldn't tend to be this long every week for LLVM, even though both are really quite deeply technical code bases. They have a bot called Highfive that jumps in. It says, thanks for a pull request, and it assigns there's a set of volunteers in the community who say, well, help onboard newcomers and review their stuff. And this seems to work really well. So my simple idea is that this works really well, and when we see a good idea, I like to copy it and steal it, because that's the open source way. So I think if people are interested, we should look at having a Fabricator bot that does this, talk to a wider community, find a group of people who'd want to be in this list of initial code reviewers who would help out with people who are making their first patch. Just a minor nit, obviously, you do still need to have the code owner in the loop. There's no use telling people to clean up their style and go through a whole bunch of things just for them to later find out that actually the whole approach was something that would never be merged in the first place. And maybe I'm completely wrong and this isn't a problem and nobody has this. I haven't done a survey or done anything essential. So I'll leave it at that, and hopefully let's chat about that later.